What if I told you that the greatest mystery in human history, which thousands of minds have puzzled over for 5,000 years, has already been solved? That the giant stones of Stonehenge, silent witnesses to the dawn of our civilization, have finally spoken, and their language was deciphered not by an archaeologist with a brush or a historian with a dusty tome. Their code was cracked by a cold, impartial mind and artificial intelligence. For centuries, Stonehenge has been not just a monument, but a true mirror in which everyone saw what they wanted to see. Romantics of the 15th century populated it with bearded druids in white robes performing bloody rituals under the full moon. Ufologists of the 20th century saw it as a landing pad for extraterrestrial ships. Pragmatists of the 21st century called it a complex astronomical calendar or a burial site for ancient chiefs. They were all right in one thing. They saw reflections of their own eras, their fears and their hopes, and they were all fundamentally wrong. Today, we begin an investigation that will put an end to this centuries-old debate. We won't rely on conjectures and beautiful legends. Our only tool will be logic, our only source data, and our guide will be the analytical system Logos 7. And the first protocol we launch is called noise. Its task is to separate facts from fiction, to clear the information field of everything that has prevented us from seeing the truth. Prepare yourself, because 99% of what you knew about Stonehenge is a lie. Let's start with the most popular and most enduring myth, the myth of the Druids. The image of Celtic priests studying the movement of stars among giant megaliths is so deeply ingrained in the public consciousness that it seems like an unshakable truth. This is a lie, a beautiful, captivating one, but a lie. We loaded all available chronology into Logos 7, comparing the construction dates of Stonehenge with the era of the Druids' flourishing culture. The result is unambiguous. The last stone was placed on the Salisbury Plain about 1,000 years before the first historically documented Druid set foot on British soil. That's like the difference between the Viking era and the launch of the first satellite. The system classifies this hypothesis as a historical phantom, with a probability approaching 0. The Druids might have used the already ancient ruins for their rituals, but they were not the builders. They were merely tourists who came to marvel at a wonder created long before them. Alright, if not Druids, then perhaps someone far more powerful. The paleocontact theory, claiming that Stonehenge is the work of alien engineers, was incredibly popular just a couple of decades ago. The idea was alluring in its simplicity. Primitive people couldn't move 50-ton boulders, so they must have had help. But this version doesn't withstand scrutiny by cold data either. Logos 7 conducted spectral and geological analysis of all the stones in the complex. Result: 100% earthly origin. No exotic alloys, no traces of processing with tools ahead of their time, no energy anomalies beyond the natural background. The simulation conducted by the system shows, why would super-advanced civilizations capable of traversing interstellar space build such a crude, albeit grandiose, object from local sandstone and dolerite? It's like building a city-sized calculator when you have a quantum computer in your pocket. According to the analysis of technological markers, the hypothesis of extraterrestrial intervention has even less value than the Druid myth. It's not just wrong, it's illogical. But what about more scientific, more grounded versions? A temple, an observatory, a necropolis. Each of these theories has real facts behind it. Yes, Stonehenge is aligned with the sun on solstice days. That's a fact. Yes, hundreds of burials have been found around it. That's also a fact. Yes, the place undoubtedly had colossal ritual significance. And that's a fact. So what's the problem? The problem is that each of these theories explains only one aspect of the monument, ignoring all the others. It describes one tree but doesn't see the whole forest. If it's just a calendar, then why drag giant blue stones 240 kilometers from Wales when there's plenty of local stone around? Why such incredible complexity and titanic labor costs to mark just 4 days a year? If it's just a burial site, why was it built and rebuilt over 1,500 years? No dynasty, no culture could exist that long. And why are the main elements not tombs, but perfectly calibrated astronomical sites? If it's just a temple, then for which god? No images, no texts, no clear artifacts pointing to a specific cult. None have been found in a century and a half of excavations. Each such theory is an attempt to stretch modern narrow understanding onto an object that was something immeasurably greater. It's like finding a smartphone and claiming it's just a pocket mirror because it has a reflective screen. Yes, it has that function, but it's not the main one. And here we come to the essence of the noise protocol. Logos 7 analyzed not the theories themselves, but the methodology of their creation. And the system discovered a fundamental error common to all. This error is called anthropocentrism, the human factor. Researchers enchanted by romance sought druids. Researchers raised on science fiction sought aliens. Astronomers saw an observatory, priests a temple, anthropologists a cemetery. They weren't studying Stonehenge. They were seeking confirmation of their own ideas. This mass of human projections, conjectures, errors, and outright fantasies is the informational noise that has drowned out the true signal from the stones for centuries. So what did the system do? It launched total filtration. All data based on assumptions were discarded. All theories without 100% confirmation in archaeology, geology, and mathematics were nullified. The entire cultural layer, all myths and legends, were marked as irrelevant noise. And when this process was completed, only the core remained on the screen.
Pure, indisputable facts.
What are these facts? Geometrically precise arrangement of megaliths. Exact mineral composition of each stone. Data from acoustic tests conducted inside the circle. Map of the starry sky over southern England for the last 10,000 years and precise topography of the prehistoric landscape. That's all we have. And that's all we need. Informational noise eliminated. 5 millennia of conjectures erased. We stand before Stonehenge as if seeing it for the first time. We no longer ask questions like who built it and why. We ask a different, far more important question. What is it? And to begin answering it, we must start with the most basic, most impossible element of this construction, the stones themselves. In the next chapter, we will launch the megalith analysis protocol. Logo 7 will show how prehistoric people, who knew neither metal nor the wheel, actually moved and installed stones weighing as much as a modern whale. And this answer won't just surprise you. It will force us to completely rewrite textbooks on ancient history. 50 tons. That's the weight of the largest sarsen monolith in Stonehenge. That's the mass of a modern Abrams tank or 8 adult African elephants.
40 chilometri.
That's the distance separating Stonehenge from the Marlborough Downs quarries, from where these giants were delivered. And finally, zero. Zero known technologies capable of accomplishing this task. No iron, no draft animals, no wheel in its transport sense. Before us is an equation with 3 variables, the solution to which has eluded us for millennia. And the official answer offered by history textbooks is not a solution. It's an excuse. They paint a pastoral picture for us. Thousands of half-naked savages, straining every muscle, pulling a giant slab on leather straps, lying on wooden rollers. They shout, sweat, but slowly and surely move toward the goal. This picture is simple, understandable, and absolutely catastrophically wrong. It insults the intelligence of those who built this monument and ours as well. Because when we remove the romance and leave pure physics, this picture crumbles to dust. We loaded this idyllic scene from the textbook into the analytical system Logo 7. All parameters were accounted for. Stone weight 50 tons, soft, uneven terrain of the Salisbury Plain, strength of the wood from that era, assumed strength of one person. The system launched a simulation, and here's what it showed. The very first roller under the central weight of the monolith experiences pressure of several thousand kilograms per square centimeter. It doesn't just crack. It explodes, turning into splinters. The 50-ton stone crashes into the soft ground and gets stuck in it forever. Alright, suppose the builders were geniuses and managed to perfectly distribute the weight across dozens of logs. The simulation continues. After 100 meters of travel over uneven ground, half the rollers are crushed or sunk into the soil. The sled on which the stone lies gets stuck fast. Now add the human factor. To move such a weight on sleds over ground, you need at least 1,200 people pulling simultaneously and in unison. Logos 7 conducted an analysis of social dynamics. Maintaining synchronized efforts in such a huge crowd over the many months needed to cover 40 kilometers is impossible. The probability of successfully completing such an operation, according to the mathematical model, is less than 1%. 1%. This isn't construction. It's a suicidal project doomed to failure from the start. And transportation is only half the job. How did they raise these boulders vertically? And how, pray tell, did they hoist 15-ton lintel beams onto them at a height of over 4 meters? The official version suggests using giant earthen or wooden ramps. We launch the simulation in Logos 7 again. The result is even more dismal. To haul the stone to such a height, the ramp's incline angle can't exceed a few degrees. That means the ramp itself would have to be hundreds of meters long. Its volume and weight would be dozens of times greater than the stones. Constructing such a ramp from wood and earth would be an even more complex engineering task than installing the megalith itself, and it would inevitably collapse under its own weight. So, does the task have no solution? Are we dealing with a miracle? No, we're dealing with genius that we refuse to see. Logos 7, discarding failed simulations based on brute force, launched reverse engineering. The system asked, what method, using only available materials, would ropes, stones, and human intelligence, has a maximum probability of success close to 100%. And the answer it found strikes with its simplicity and elegance. The builders of Stonehenge were not savages. They were engineers. They thought not in terms of force but balance. The system reconstructed a forgotten technology. For transporting stones, rollers weren't used in the usual sense. The stone was encased in a huge wooden cradle frame that gave it a rounded shape. Now it could be rolled, not dragged. Just a few dozen people, using long levers, could roll this giant cylinder over significant distances with minimal effort. This was slow, almost meditative work, based on knowledge of physics, not on shouts and strain. And for installation, no ramps. Logos discovered traces in archaeological data that everyone ignored. Small but deep pits next to the main holes. These were sockets for a counterweight system. The stone was brought to the edge of the dug hole for it. On one side, it was secured with ropes. On the other, a lever with a giant counterweight of bags filled with earth and stones was attached. Then the hole under the stone on one side was undercut, disrupting the balance. The giant smoothly descended into its socket under its own weight, almost without human effort. This wasn't fighting gravity. It was using it. But the most ingenious part was lifting the lintels. No ramps. The lintel stone was placed on the ground between two vertical supports, and then logs and stones were gradually layered under it centimeter by centimeter, layer by layer, creating a growing platform. This could take several weeks, but it was an absolutely safe and controlled process. When the platform reached the required height, the stone was fitted with jeweler's precision into the grooves on the tops of the supports, and the platform was removed.
Pure mechanics, pure intelligence.
Logos 7 asserts, building Stonehenge required not thousands of muscular slaves, but several hundred highly skilled engineers and workers possessing sacred knowledge in physics, mechanics, and logistics. They were the elite of their time, guardians of technologies we deemed impossible. We've just solved the riddle of the Sarsens, the local heaviest stones. We understood that their builders were not primitive savages, but a true design bureau of the Stone Age. But this knowledge only opens the door to an even deeper mystery. For the Sarsens are merely the skeleton of Stonehenge. Its soul is the so-called blue stones. They are smaller, but each traveled not 40 kilometers, but 240 kilometers. They were brought from the Preseli Hills in Wales through mountains, forests, and the turbulent waters of the Bristol Channel. If transporting the Sarsens was a brilliant engineering task, delivering the blue stones is something beyond. It's a logistical epic that doesn't fit any known models. In the next chapter, we will embark on this incredible route. We will launch the Vector Quarry Protocol and learn what incredible technology allowed prehistoric people to accomplish this impossible journey. If the logistics of the Sarsen giants was a brilliant engineering task, the journey of the blue stones is madness. Absolute, irrational, majestic madness. Imagine yourself as a brilliant Stone Age engineer. You've just solved an almost impossible task of delivering and installing local 50-ton monoliths. And now, instead of using the same easily accessible material to complete the build, you make a decision that seems absurd. You decide you need other stones, specific stones. And these stones are 240 kilometers away from you, beyond mountains, forests, and the most dangerous sea strait. This is the key question that stumps any pragmatic theory about Stonehenge. Why? Why expend efforts comparable to, or perhaps exceeding, all the previous work for the delivery of dozens of stones, each weighing up to 4 tons? This isn't just stone. It's a geological marker, an artifact with unique properties, for which the ancient engineers were willing to cross the country, alter the landscape, and spend a decade. Today, we launch the Vector Quarry Protocol. Our goal is not just to trace this incredible route. Our goal is to understand its logic, the logic of madness. As with the Sarsens, official science offers us two main scenarios. The first, a heroic expedition. Thousands of people drag the stones over land and ferry them on rafts across the sea. We loaded into Logos 7 the most detailed of the proposed routes. First, dragged to rivers, then on rafts downstream through the Bristol Channel and again by rivers to the Salisbury Plain. The system simulated the risks. Result: catastrophe. The Bristol Channel is known for one of the world's largest tidal amplitudes, reaching 15 meters. The currents here are unpredictable and treacherous. Primitive rafts made of logs and hides, loaded with several tons, would be practically unmanageable. According to Logos 7's modeling, even in the most favorable weather conditions, the probability of losing cargo and crew while crossing the channel would be over 60%. That means to deliver dozens of stones, they would have had to send over 200 expeditions, losing hundreds of people and more than 120 precious monoliths along the way. No culture would adhere to such a wasteful and deadly plan. This isn't logistics, it's ritual suicide. Alright, then the second scenario, which for a long time was considered a lifeline for historians. The glacial theory. It states that people didn't drag the stones from Wales at all. A giant glacier did it for them tens of thousands of years ago, moving south and conveniently leaving the blue stones somewhere near Salisbury. The builders simply found them and used them. Beautiful, simple, and again a lie. Logos 7 analyzed all available paleogeological data and maps of glacial movements over Britain for the last 100,000 years. The system's conclusion was categorical. The trajectory of the glacier that could have captured stones from the Preseli Hills never passed through the Salisbury Plain. It veered much further west. Moreover, mineralogical analysis shows that the stones used in Stonehenge are of at least 7 different types, including dolerites, rhyolites, and volcanic tuff, and all come from one tiny region in Wales, an area of just a few square kilometers. A glacier is a chaotic force. It scoops up everything in its path. Couldn't have made such a precise, selective geological selection. This fact alone is 100% proof. The stones weren't found. They were chosen, delivered by people. So both main theories failed. One crashed against the mathematics of probabilities, the other against geology. We're at a dead end again, but it's in such dead ends that Logos 7 finds a third path. The system discarded the assumption that ancient people thought in our categories, land or sea. It began searching for an alternative route, the safest and most energy efficient, even if it was the longest and least obvious. The system started analyzing satellite topographic maps of the region, but not in optical but in gravimetric and hydrological spectra. It searched not for roads, but for traces of ancient water, and it found them. Logos 7 discovered a network of anomalies, barely noticeable, silted and overgrown linear depressions that connected ancient riverbeds, streams, and lakes. What for centuries was considered natural landscape features turned out to be a network of artificial canals. The ancient builders didn't choose between land and sea. They created their own third path, a continuous water corridor. They didn't drag the stones. They floated them. They used a system of locks, dams, and canals to raise water levels, bypass rapids, and connect isolated waterways into a single transport network stretching hundreds of kilometers. This explains everything. It explains why they could transport heavy loads with minimal risk. It explains why they could do it with relatively small but highly skilled teams. This wasn't an expedition. This was a meticulously planned logistical operation on an unprecedented scale for that era. They weren't just building a monument. They were terraforming an entire country to suit their needs. This discovery changes absolutely everything. It transforms prehistoric Britons from primitive tribes into a civilization of hydraulic engineers, comparable in ambition to the builders of the Egyptian pyramids. They possessed knowledge we considered impossible for the Stone Age. But the answer to how only sharpens the main question: why? Why build canals across the country for stones that are no larger or stronger than local ones? What's their secret? Logos 7 has already conducted a preliminary analysis, and it's not about their weight or color. It's about their hidden properties. Properties that become obvious only if you stop looking at them and start listening to them. We know what they built, we know how they did it, but we still don't know the main thing. When we're told that construction took 1,500 years, that's too vague, too imprecise a figure. It doesn't allow us to see the design. In the next chapter, Logos 7 will launch the chronometry epoch protocol. The system will conduct cross-analysis of all dating methods and create a precise, minute-by-minute chronology of Stonehenge's erection. And this chronology will show us that each construction phase was not random. It was tied to events happening not on Earth, but in deep space half a millennium ago. Think about this number, 1,500 years. That's the official time frame during which we're assured Stonehenge was built and rebuilt from the first ditch to the last repositioned stone. That's more time than has passed from the fall of the Roman Empire to our days. We're asked to believe that some grand design was passed down orally through 75 generations, through changes of peoples, languages, beliefs, and even climate. This isn't just unlikely. It's absurd. Such a stretched-out chronology is the perfect cover for our ignorance. It turns the greatest engineering project of the prehistoric world into some chaotic, almost random pile of stones. As if different tribes, succeeding each other, just added something of their own without a common plan. This is a lie. A convenient, soothing one, but a fundamental lie. Because Stonehenge is a model of precision, and precision doesn't tolerate a 1,500-year margin of error. The problem has always been the tools. Radiocarbon dating, our main method to peer into the past, is magnificent but not omnipotent. It gives dates with an error of plus or minus 50, or even 100 years. For archaeology, that's acceptable, but for understanding the design, it's a catastrophe. It's like trying to reconstruct the blueprint of a complex clock mechanism, knowing only that its parts were made sometime in the 20th century. To understand the machine, we need precision. To understand Stonehenge, we need precision to the year, to the day, to the hour. That's the task we set for the Logos 7 system. We launched the chronometry epoch protocol. The system didn't just compile all existing radiocarbon dates. It created a multidimensional model into which data from dozens of different sources were loaded. Dendrochronology, based on annual rings of found wooden artifacts. Luminescence dating, showing when minerals in the soil last saw sunlight. Lichenometry, measuring age by the growth rate of lichens on stones. And most importantly, precise astronomical calculations. The system correlated each construction phase with the starry sky map of that time, seeking not coincidences, but cause and effect connections. And when the processing of trillions of bytes of data was completed, a completely new picture emerged on the screen. A picture that destroyed the myth of chaotic long-term construction. Stonehenge wasn't built continuously. It was built in 5 clearly defined short and incredibly intense impulses. And between these impulses lay centuries of silence, centuries of waiting. The first impulse, around 3000 BCE.
No stones.
Ancient engineers create a giant earthen observatory. They dig a ditch and bank in a perfect circular shape and mark 56 holes, known to us as Aubrey holes. Logos 7 shows that these aren't just ritual pits. This was an analog computer, a 3-dimensional map of the sky imprinted on the Earth. And its creation was timed to an event that the system identified as the appearance in the sky over Britain of a supernova, an explosion visible during the day for several weeks. They weren't just building. They imprinted a cosmic-scale event into the Earth. The second impulse. After 400 years of silence, around 2600 BCE, the Blue Stones operation begins. That incredible delivery from Wales. Why exactly then? According to the system's astronomical calculations, it was during this period that a unique planetary alignment occurred, visible in the winter solstice sector, which repeats only once every few thousand years. Delivering the stones wasn't just construction. It was a ritual timed to a celestial parade. The third impulse, the most powerful and shortest, around 2450 BCE. In less than 100 years, what we call Stonehenge is erected. The giant sarsen circle and trilithons. Titanic work completed in record time. They were in a hurry. Logos 7 gives the answer why. They were building their instrument for a specific date. Calculations show that it was during this time that a total solar eclipse, one of the longest in millennia, was to pass its central shadow exactly through this place. They weren't building just an observatory. They were building a theater for the greatest celestial performance. The fourth and fifth impulses, a series of small but very precise rearrangements of the inner blue stone circle, occurring roughly every 100 to 200 years. Historians considered this a sign of decline and chaos. Logos proved the opposite. These weren't rebuilds, they were calibrations. The ancient astronomers knew about precession, the slow shift of the Earth's axis. Their celestial instrument accumulated error over time, and they, like modern scientists, periodically adjusted it to continue working with absolute precision. What does all this mean? It changes everything. Stonehenge isn't a building that took half a millennium to construct. It's a complex scientific instrument that existed for 1,500 years, and its creators returned to it only when the cosmic calendar demanded it. The long periods of lull weren't eras of oblivion. They were eras of observation and waiting for the right celestial signal. We've gotten the answer to when, and this answer turned out to be far more shocking than we could have imagined. The builders of Stonehenge weren't just tracking the sun and moon for agricultural needs. They were monitoring the rarest unique events: supernova explosions, planetary parades, predicting eclipse corridors. They weren't interested in the annual cycle. They were interested in the deep, epical rhythms of the universe. And now, knowing this, we can ask the main question: why did they need such incredible precision? What were they trying to calculate? In the next chapter, we will launch the Cosmic Correlation Protocol. Logos 7 will reveal the true astronomical purpose of Stonehenge. And you'll understand that it wasn't just a calendar or temple. It was something capable of peering into the future. Calendar, observatory, a place for observing the sun. These words, which we're so accustomed to applying to Stonehenge, are the grandest understatement in the history of science. Calling Stonehenge a calendar is like calling a modern supercomputer an abacus. Yes, it can show you the date, it can point to solstice days with impeccable accuracy. But this function is so basic, so primitive compared to its true purpose, that mentioning it means saying nothing. It's like admiring that a spaceship has portholes, without understanding that it's capable of crossing galaxies. We've established that Stonehenge was built in short, intense periods timed to rare celestial events. This alone proves that its creators were interested in something more than just the change of seasons. They were interested in the laws of celestial mechanics, the deep cycles hidden from the naked eye that govern the luminaries. And to understand this design, we launched the Cosmic Correlation Protocol in the Logos 7 system. We loaded into it a full, centimeter-precise, three-dimensional model of the monument and asked the system to stop seeing it as a static structure. We asked it to see it as a working instrument. And the first thing the system confirmed is the eclipse prediction function. This theory isn't new, but until now it was considered just one hypothesis. Logos 7 turned it into proven fact. The key to this mechanism is those same 56 Aubrey holes, dug in the earliest stage of construction. 56. This number isn't random. It's ideal for tracking the most complex lunar cycle known as the Saros cycle, which lasts about 18.6 years and determines the recurrence of solar and lunar eclipses. The system modeled how this computer worked. Ancient astronomers used three markers, perhaps wooden posts or special stones, that they moved around the circle of 56 holes. One marker symbolized the sun, another the moon, and the third, most important, the lunar node, an invisible point of orbital intersection. By moving these markers according to a specific algorithm, for example, the solar 1-2 holes every 13 days and the lunar 1-2 holes every 12, they could model the movement of the luminaries with incredible accuracy. And when all three markers converged at one point, it meant one thing: an eclipse is coming. They knew when it would happen months or even years before the event. This knowledge alone was a source of colossal power. Imagine a priest astronomer who steps out to his people and announces, "In 3 moons at noon, I will extinguish the sun." And when, at the appointed hour, day turns to night, his power becomes absolute, divine. But even this incredible function was only part of a far more complex mechanism. Logos 7 went further. The system began analyzing not just the circles, but the arches, the giant trilithons forming the central horseshoe. For a long time, they were considered just monumental gates. But these aren't gates. They're sights, optical instruments. Each gap between the colossal stones is a carefully calibrated window into space, and these windows are aimed not only at the sun. The correlation analysis conducted by the system revealed a stunning pattern. Different trilithon windows on certain days of the year perfectly aligned with the rising and setting points not just of the sun, but of the brightest stars in the night sky. Sirius, Arcturus, Vega. But that's not all. The system discovered more complex multi-year cycles. For example, one window pointed to Venus's rising point only in the year when its maximum elongation, visible distance from the sun, reached its peak. This event repeats every 8 years. Another site was aimed at Jupiter, but only at its oppositions occurring once every 13 months. They tracked not only the sun and moon, they kept precise accounts of planetary and stellar movements. Stonehenge wasn't just a machine for predicting eclipses. It was an entire planetary model, an analog planetarium allowing understanding and prediction of the most complex celestial cycles. This level of knowledge is what official history attributes to the Babylonians or Greeks, who lived 2,000 years later. Why did they need all this? The answer Logos offers is both simple and frightening. They believed that events in the sky were directly connected to events on Earth. They sought patterns in planetary movements, not just beauty. They tried to calculate the rhythm of the universe itself to synchronize their own lives with it. They sought cosmic harmony. And here we approach the last, deepest mystery. The astronomical function explains Stonehenge's geometry. It explains its location, but it in no way explains the choice of material. Why drag exactly the blue stones from Wales 240 kilometers away? After all, for astronomical observations, any stone or even a wooden post would suffice. So, these stones had another non-visual purpose. Logos conducted a cross-analysis of astronomical cycles and the physical properties of dolerite, from which the blue stones are made. And the system found one incredible correlation. These stones possess unique acoustic properties. When struck, they ring like bells. And now imagine, at the moment predicted by their stone computer, when planets align or the moon's shadow covers the Earth, they didn't just look at the sky, they struck the stones. We stand on the threshold of the greatest discovery in our investigation. We know that the builders of Stonehenge were brilliant engineers capable of moving colossal boulders. We know they were astronomers whose knowledge was millennia ahead of their time. But we still haven't answered the main question. Why did they haul exactly the blue stones 240 kilometers away? Why commit this logistical feat if ordinary wooden posts would do for astronomical observations? The answer is simple, because astronomy was only one half of the equation. They didn't just look at the cosmos, they tried to speak with it. What if I told you that the greatest secret of Stonehenge isn't to be seen, but heard? That it's not just a silent stone circle, but a gigantic, perfectly tuned musical instrument. This idea may seem fantastic, but it's based on an indisputable physical fact that has long remained on the periphery of scientific research. The blue stones, delivered from the Press Ely Hills, possess unique lithophonic properties. Simply put, when struck, they ring. They ring like bells, producing a pure, long, and melodious sound. This fact was known before, but considered merely a curious coincidence. But in the worldview painted by Logos 7, there are no coincidences. We launched the Resonance Harmony Protocol. The system was loaded with a full acoustic model of Stonehenge, accounting for the mineral composition, shape, sizes, and exact placement of each stone, both sarsens and blues. The system's task: model what happens if the blue stones are struck. The result exceeded our wildest expectations. Stonehenge isn't just a set of ringing stones. It's a perfectly designed resonance chamber. The first thing the simulation discovered, the giant outer circle of sarsen megaliths, isn't a wall or fence. It's an acoustic reflector. Its perfectly calibrated geometry and dense structure were specifically designed to capture sound waves from the center and focus them inward, creating a standing wave. The sound didn't dissipate. It accumulated, its intensity multiplied many times. Any sound produced in the center became deafening, all-pervading. The second discovery was even more astonishing. The 19 blue stones arranged in the inner horseshoe weren't just placed in a pretty order. They were tuned. Logos 7's acoustic analysis showed that each stone, when struck, emits a sound of a specific, unique frequency. Together, they didn't create chaotic noise. They formed a complex harmonic chord. This was a prehistoric orchestra where 4-ton monoliths played the role of instruments. Archaeologists found hundreds of stone ball hammers, so-called mauls, near them. Now their purpose is obvious. These weren't construction tools. They were sticks for a gigantic xylophone. But what music exactly did this stone orchestra play, and for whom was it intended? Logos 7 conducted spectral analysis of the resulting frequencies. And here we go beyond simple music. The system determined that the dominant in this chord were two groups of frequencies. The first in the range of 8 to 13 Hz. This is the so-called alpha rhythm, the frequency of the human brain in a state of calm wakefulness meditation. The second in the range of 4 to 7 Hz. This is the theta rhythm. It occurs in phases of deep relaxation, sleep with dreams or trance. Now put all the puzzle pieces together. Imagine the ritual. The day arrives, predicted by their stone computer, the day of an eclipse or planetary parade. The chosen ones gather inside the circle. At the signal of the priest astronomer, the musicians begin striking rhythmic blows on the blue stones. The air fills not just with sound, but with pulsating, physically tangible vibration. The Sarsen circle catches this vibration and focuses it on the people, immersing them in a powerful acoustic field. Their brains, under the influence of these frequencies, involuntarily synchronize with them. They enter a state of collective control trance. Stonehenge was a psychoacoustic machine, a tool for altering consciousness. Its builders didn't pray to gods. They used the laws of physics and neurobiology to achieve states that we today would call altered consciousness. Astronomical precision was needed to choose the right moment when the door to other states of perception is open, and acoustic harmony was the key that unlocked that door. This was sacred technology, forgotten but technology. We've uncovered yet another, perhaps the most important, function of this incredible structure. It was not only a scientific instrument and not only a ritual center. It was a tool for working with human consciousness. But this knowledge raises an even more complex question. Who were these people? A people capable of combining astronomy, hydraulics, engineering mechanics, and psychoacoustics in one project cannot be just a primitive tribe. This was a civilization with profound knowledge of the world and humanity. We've deciphered the machine. Now it's time to decipher its creators. In the next chapter, we will launch the People Signature Protocol. Using the latest data from genetic and isotopic analysis of remains found around Stonehenge, Logo 7 will paint a portrait of this mysterious people. And this portrait will finally shatter our perception of the Stone Age. Who are they? This question is the last bastion protecting the mystery of Stonehenge. We've cracked their technologies, deciphered their celestial maps, heard the acoustic resonance of their stones. We understood what they built and how they did it. But until we understand who they were, our entire reconstruction will remain a soulless blueprint, a ghost of a brilliant design without a face or name. Traditional archaeology gives us only fragments: pottery shards, flint tools, human remains. It describes the culture of the Beaker people or Neolithic folk. These dry, lifeless terms create an image of primitive farmers who accidentally built something great over 1,500 years without fully understanding what. This image is a mirage, a soothing fairy tale that hides an inconvenient truth. The truth that the builders of Stonehenge were so unlike their neighbors that they seemed like aliens in their own era. To tear off this mask of anonymity, we launched the People Signature Protocol. We abandoned analyzing potsherds. Instead, Logo 7 conducted a deep analysis of the only information carrier that doesn't lie: human DNA. The system was loaded with full genomes extracted from dozens of remains found in burials around the monument. The system compared them to the genetic map of ancient Europe, and the result of this analysis forever changes the history of the British Isles. The first stage was genetic analysis of the bones of the most ancient hunter-gatherers who lived in Britain before construction began. Their genome was unique. It formed in isolation over millennia. Then, about 6,000 years ago, what the system classified as a complete replacement event occurs. The previous gene pool disappears almost entirely. A new people arrives on the island, and the genetic marker of this people unmistakably points to its origin: the region of modern Anatolia, Turkey. These were migrants, pioneers. They brought with them what Britain didn't yet know: agriculture, domesticated livestock, and, as we now understand, incredible knowledge in engineering and astronomy. The builders of Stonehenge weren't indigenous inhabitants. They were newcomers, not from space but from the other end of Europe. They came to this land with a ready-formed plan. But genetics is only half the story. It says where their ancestors came from, but where did the builders themselves grow up? To answer this question, Logos 7 conducted isotopic analysis of their bones and tooth enamel. Chemical elements from food and water consumed in childhood are forever imprinted in our tissues. The ratio of strontium and oxygen isotopes is like a geological passport that precisely indicates where a person grew up. Analysis of remains from the most important burials around Stonehenge gave a shocking result. Almost all key figures buried in immediate proximity to the stones weren't locals. The person buried at the foot of Stonehenge didn't spend their childhood here. He grew up hundreds of kilometers away in the mountains of Wales, near the very quarries where the blue stones were mined. Others came from the north, from the Orkney Islands, where other, no less mysterious megalithic complexes stand. The picture Logos paints is stunning. Stonehenge wasn't a tribal sanctuary of one people. It was a national, if not pan-European, project. It was a gathering point, a pilgrimage site for the most knowledgeable, most skilled people from all corners of the ancient world. They came here to apply their knowledge and stay here forever. And what was their social structure? Forget the image of a pharaoh driving thousands of powerless slaves to construction. Burial analysis revealed no signs of rigid hierarchy, no royal tomb drowning in gold. Most are buried modestly, but with deepest respect. Skeletons show no traces of exhausting slave labor. On the contrary, many bones have signs of well-healed fractures, indicating a high level of care for tribesmen. Logos modeled their society based on these data. This was a society of equals, but not identical. A society built not on power, but on knowledge. Most likely, it was a kind of caste of engineer astronomers, guardians of sacred technologies, who lived apart and dedicated their lives to one great cause. They didn't conquer, they built. They didn't accumulate wealth, they accumulated knowledge. And this knowledge allowed them to unite thousands of people from different tribes to realize their grand project. They were a single people not by blood, but by spirit, united by a common goal that was more important to them than life. So, the portrait is ready. Before us are not savages. Before us is a people of migrants, intellectuals, Stone Age scientists. They came to these lands bringing revolutionary technologies and profound knowledge of the universe. They created a pilgrimage center for initiates from all over Europe. They were a society based on knowledge and mutual respect. But solving one mystery breeds another, even deeper. Why did they come here specifically? What were they seeking on this distant foggy island at the edge of the world? And where did they disappear? For after 1,500 years, their unique culture dissolves without a trace. Their knowledge seems to vanish into nowhere. The answer may lie not only in the stones themselves. In the next chapter, we will launch the landscape synthesis protocol. Logos 7 will prove that Stonehenge isn't a separate object. It's merely the central, most noticeable detail of a far larger mechanism etched across the entire Salisbury Plain. And only by seeing this machine in full can we understand its true purpose. We made a fundamental mistake. For thousands of years, we looked at the masterpiece but saw only its central element. We admired the diamond, ignoring the skillfully crafted setting that gave it meaning. We studied Stonehenge like a lone pyramid standing in the desert. This was a mistake, because Stonehenge isn't a pyramid. It's the spire of a gigantic, almost invisible cathedral whose walls and naves are etched across dozens of square kilometers of the Salisbury Plain. For a long time, all other prehistoric monuments in this area, barrows, banks, ditches, were considered mere background, a chaotic accumulation of traces from various cultures that lived here over centuries. We saw the forest but didn't notice that the trees were planted in strict geometric order. We saw the landscape but didn't understand that the landscape itself is the main artifact. To correct this mistake, we launched the landscape synthesis protocol. Logos 7 stopped considering Stonehenge as an isolated object. Instead, the system created a unified digital model of the entire Salisbury Plain. It loaded not only archaeological maps but also data from LiDAR scanning, ground-penetrating radar, satellite gravimetry, and hydrological analysis. The system combed through trillions of data points, seeking not objects, but connections. Not stones, but patterns. And what it found turns the entire area into a single gigantic mechanism. The first and most obvious connection is the so-called avenue. a wide earthen road bounded by ditches and banks that lead straight to the entrance of Stonehenge. Its length is almost 3 kilometers, and it doesn't just point the way. Its axis aligns with incredible accuracy to the line of sunrise on the summer solstice day. This isn't just a road, it's a runway for the sun. It was a processional path directing the flow of energy or people to the heart of the complex. But far more important is what's at the other end of this invisible vector. About 3 kilometers northeast of Stonehenge lies another gigantic complex, Donington Walls. This is a huge henge surrounded by a ditch and bank, inside which was a large settlement, and another monument known as Woodhenge or the Wooden Henge, and here Logos 7 discovered striking symmetry. If Stonehenge is the realm of stone, eternity, and the dead, then Donington Walls was its mirror reflection. The realm of wood, temporality, and the living. The system reconstructed the ritual. People gathered at Woodhenge, the world of the living. Then they began their journey. They descended to the river Avon, which flows between the two complexes. The river wasn't just a barrier, it was the boundary of worlds, like the mythical Styx. Crossing it, they stepped onto the avenue, the path leading to the world of ancestors, the world of stone, Stonehenge. The two complexes were inextricably linked. This was a single ritual mechanism symbolizing the transition from life to eternity. But even this grand picture was incomplete. Logos 7, analyzing deeper and more ancient layers of the landscape, discovered yet another, the most mysterious element of this system, the Greater Cursus. This colossal structure consists of 2 parallel ditches and banks running east to west for almost 3 kilometers. Its width is about 100 m. It's enormous but almost invisible from the ground, and it's 1,000 years older than Stonehenge itself. For a long time, its purpose was an absolute mystery, but when the system overlaid it on the overall map, everything fell into place. The Cursus wasn't linked to solstices. Its axis was aligned with equinox points. It was the first basic element of the entire system. This was the initial coordinate grid imprinted on the landscape by the first migrant engineers. It set the sacred geometry of the entire space. Stonehenge and the avenue were built later, but with clear regard to its position. The Cursus was the foundation, and Stonehenge the altar in this gigantic open-air temple. So what do we have in the end? Before us is not just a stone circle. Before us is a gigantic ritual machine covering dozens of square kilometers. It has the world of the living, Donington Walls, and the world of the dead, Stonehenge. It has the river of transition, Avon, and the path of initiation, Avenue. And all this is built on an ancient foundation with perfect astronomical alignment, the Cursus. The landscape isn't background. The landscape is the instrument. It's a gigantic circuit board where every bank, every ditch, every stone is an element of a single schematic. And this schematic was designed for one sole purpose, to conduct one main ritual, to activate this machine at the right, star-calculated moment to achieve some effect. We've assembled all the puzzle pieces. We know the engineering, astronomy, acoustics. We know who the builders were. And now we see the whole machine. The last question remains the most important. Why? What was the ultimate goal of this titanic project that lasted half a millennium? In the next, concluding chapter of our investigation, we will launch the final purpose protocol. Logos 7 will unite all the obtained data into a single whole to give one exhaustive answer. And this answer will change not only our perception of Stonehenge. It will change our perception of the capabilities of ancient humans and the very nature of reality as they saw it. We stand at the goal. Behind us are months of analysis, hundreds of gigabytes of processed data, dozens of failed hypotheses. We cleared the information field of noise. We reconstructed forgotten technologies. We mapped time and cosmos precisely. We heard the music of the stones and saw the faces of the builders. Each protocol launched in the Logos 7 system gave us one fragment of the puzzle: engineering, astronomy, acoustics, anthropology, landscape design. Now comes the moment of truth. The moment when all these fragments must fit into a single exhaustive picture. Today, we launch the last main protocol of our investigation, the Purpose Protocol. System 7 begins the final synthesis. It no longer analyzes separate parts. It seeks common logic, a single law that binds them all together. It asks that very question that has echoed on the Salisbury Plain for 5,000 years. Why? The system started with the simple question, how? And we got the answer. Brilliant engineering based not on brute force, but on knowledge of physics. Then it overlaid the layer of time, asking when. And we learned that these weren't centuries of chaos, but short, precise impulses tied to rare celestial events. On this map of time lay the map of cosmos. Why look at the stars? And we understood that it wasn't just a calendar, but a complex analog computer for predicting the deep rhythms of the universe. To this was added sound. Why these specific stones? And we discovered that it was a psychoacoustic machine for inducing collective trance. Then the system added the human factor. Who? And we saw the face of a people of intellectuals, a caste of knowledge guardians. And finally, all this was placed in space, where we realized that Stonehenge is merely the heart of a gigantic landscape mechanism. Each of these answers was a breakthrough, but together they seemed a set of disparate functions. Observatory, temple, place of power, necropolis, musical instrument. And here Logos 7 made the main step. The system stopped seeing a set of functions. It saw a single sequential process, a single ritual, and gave it a name. Stonehenge isn't a temple, not an observatory, not a tomb. It's technology. Technology of connection. Imagine this day, the day they've waited for decades, perhaps centuries, the day calculated by their stone computer, the day of perfect planetary alignment or total solar eclipse. The entire landscape machine comes into motion. The procession begins at Dyington Walls, in the world of the living. Thousands of people, the uninitiated, remain there. Only the chosen, the knowledge guardians, begin their path. They cross the river Avon, the symbolic boundary of worlds, and step onto the avenue. This isn't just a road. It's a channel that focuses their will, their intentions, as they move to the stone heart of the world. They enter the circle. The cosmos above them takes a perfectly calibrated position. The moment arrives. At the signal of the chief astronomer, the ritual begins. Dozens of guardians strike rhythmic blows on the blue stones. The air begins to vibrate. The Sarsen circle catches the sound waves, amplifies them many times, and focuses them on those inside. Alpha and theta rhythms penetrate their consciousness. The mind of each synchronizes with the mind of the other. They cease to be separate individuals. They become a single collective consciousness tuned to one single frequency. Their bodies are here on Earth, but their united mind, amplified by the resonance of the stones and focused in a unique moment of cosmic alignment, makes the transition. Where? With whom are they trying to establish connection? With gods? With aliens? No. The answer is much deeper and closer. They are trying to establish connection with their ancestors. Stonehenge isn't just a necropolis where the great were buried. It was an archive, a repository of consciousnesses. They believed that the knowledge, wisdom, and very essence of their great engineers, astronomers, and leaders doesn't die with the body. It remains bound to this place. And in certain calculated moments, when the veil between worlds thins, one can establish contact with them, ask a question, get an answer, update knowledge, check with the primary source. This was technology for maintaining continuity of knowledge in a non-literate culture. Their incredible knowledge in engineering and astronomy couldn't be passed orally through 75 generations without distortions. The only way to preserve it in purity was to periodically connect to the ancestor's server and download the needed information directly. Now everything falls into place. The titanic efforts to deliver the stones, the jeweler's precision in calculations, the complex psychoacoustic tuning. All this was necessary to create ideal conditions for opening this brief window of connection. This was their main shrine, their chief scientific instrument, their only way not to lose themselves, not to forget who they are across centuries. This is the purpose of Stonehenge. Not just to look at the stars, but to use them as a key. Not just to honor the dead, but to speak with them. Not just to build from stone, but to create a bridge between the world of matter and the world of spirit, using the universal language of the universe. The language of vibrations, geometry, and light. We've found the answer. Logos 7 has completed the protocol. The task seems solved, but by solving one mystery, we've spawned another, even deeper. If the civilization possessed such incredible knowledge, why did it disappear? Where did this technology go? And what if Stonehenge wasn't the only such machine on the planet? In the concluding chapter of our investigation, We'll talk about the legacy of this discovery and how it forces us to completely rethink everything we knew about our own past. We've found the answer, but what will we do with this knowledge? For 10 chapters, we've followed the trails of ghosts, cracking the code sealed in stone. And now, as the Stonehenge machine has revealed its purpose to us, we stand before a discovery that's much greater than just solving an ancient mystery. This is a verdict on our entire arrogant perception of the past and, perhaps, a troubling prophecy for our future. For centuries, we've looked down on prehistoric humans. We saw them as savages driven only by fear and superstition. Their monuments we explained as primitive cults, their art as naive attempts to appease fearsome gods. We, people of the 21st century, with our smartphones and space telescopes, considered ourselves the pinnacle of evolution. According to the final synthesis of Logos 7, this picture is a lie, a dangerous and smug one. The builders of Stonehenge weren't savages. They were scientists. They were a civilization whose science took a completely different path of development. We directed our intellect outward to conquering matter. We created the wheel, gunpowder, the atomic reactor. Our science is the science of power, technology of external control. They directed their genius inward. They were interested not in matter, but in consciousness. They weren't concerned with building a faster cart. They were concerned with building a bridge to other planes of reality. Their science is the science of harmony, technology of internal exploration. Stonehenge isn't a primitive temple. It's a hadron collider for studying consciousness. And this understanding forces us to ask the most painful question. If they were so wise, why did they disappear? Why didn't their incredible knowledge develop? Where did this civilization of the mind go? Logos, analyzing chronological and cultural cross-sections, offers an answer. It wasn't a catastrophe. It was a choice. Their civilization didn't perish. It was displaced. Around 2200 BCE, a new technology arrives in Europe, much louder, more aggressive, and seductive. Bronze. The Stone Age, the age of collective knowledge and harmony, gives way to the Bronze Age, the age of individual power. Bronze gave humans what stone couldn't: effective weapons and personal wealth. Why spend a decade building a psychoacoustic machine for connecting with ancestors, when you can forge a bronze sword and simply take what you need from your neighbor? Why seek harmony with the universe when you can smelt ore and become the richest person in the tribe? The new paradigm, based on power and matter, proved more viable in a world of growing competition. The modeling conducted by the system shows that the knowledge of Stonehenge's builders didn't vanish in one day. It simply became unclaimed. It went underground. From publicly accessible science, it turned into esoteric secret teachings passed from teacher to student in closed societies. It became the basis for those very myths of druids, mages, and wizards. These were merely echoes, distorted memories of a great science that the world traded for the gleam of metal. And this brings us to the last global conclusion. Was Stonehenge unique? Logos 7 categorically asserts, no, it's merely the best preserved and most studied node in a global network. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is 6,000 years older. The Karnak stones in France, Newgrange in Ireland. Dozens of megalithic complexes around the world whose purpose we still don't understand. The system is already analyzing correlations between them. Astronomical, geological, acoustic. Preliminary data indicate that these weren't isolated projects. These were parts of a single design. Perhaps a global civilization existed on our planet, unified in its scientific approach, about which we know absolutely nothing. A civilization that left us these stone messages, this stellar archive. For 5,000 years, the stones were silent. Today, with the help of artificial intelligence, we've made them speak, and they've told us a story not of a primitive past, but of a lost future, of a path humanity could have chosen but rejected. They remind us that progress isn't always a straight line, and that technologies can serve not only the conquest of the world, but its understanding. The investigation is complete, but the real work is just beginning. The stones of Stonehenge aren't just an answer to a puzzle of the past. They're a question addressed to our present. In our world, there's also its own gleaming, seductive metal technologies giving almost boundless power. But there are also eternal questions about consciousness, meaning, our place in the universe. And this question, after 5,000 years, is now addressed to us.